Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into the intense roots of generational conflict and radical ideology, and we're looking at it all through the lens of Ivan Turgenev's 19th century masterpiece, Fathers and Sons. We're going to explore a historical moment when the youth didn't just casually disagree with their parents, but actually wanted to erase their world completely. But before we get into the weeds, we have to ask a pretty heavy question. What actually happens when a new generation aggressively rejects every single tradition and institution that came before them? It's a question that feels incredibly modern, right? But to find the answer, we actually need to look back to a very specific moment in history. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover a fractured Russia, the birth of the radical nihilist, the clash of generations, the unraveling of ideology, and finally, Turgenev's proposed middle ground. Let's kick things off with Section 1, a Russia divided. To really grasp this conflict, we need to set the scene. We're in 19th century Russia, a nation undergoing seismic and highly volatile socio-political shifts. Our narrative sits right within a turbulent sandwich of history. We start with the hopeful reforms of Tsar Alexander II in 1855, move through the writing of Turgenev's novel, and end with the really tragic assassination of that exact same Tsar in 1881, which was spurred by growing radicalism. It was an era of extreme acceleration. And the sheer scale of these changes? Absolutely staggering. In 1861, the emancipation of the serfs impacted 52 million people. To put that into perspective, that was 85% of the Russian population. Imagine the shockwaves. The traditional feudal system that had organized their society for centuries was just completely upended, almost overnight. As you can guess, this massive socioeconomic upheaval drew a really sharp ideological battle line. On one side, you had the fathers, the men of the 1840s. These guys were aristocratic idealists rooted in romanticism and tradition. On the other side, you had the sons, the men of the 1860s. These were young, radical intellectuals driven entirely by science and a new philosophy called nihilism. They looked at the older generation and honestly, they saw nothing but outdated, useless posturing. All right, moving on to Section 2, the rise of nihilism. So what exactly was this philosophy? Well, actually, scratch the modern idea of just believing in nothing. The Russian nihilists of this era deeply believed in things like science and material progress, but they practiced a fiercely active rejection of all authority and tradition. They truly, literally believed that the old world had to be entirely razed to the ground before anything better could be constructed. Turgenev brings this abstract philosophy to life perfectly through his protagonist, Yevgeny Bazarov. Just look at this quote. Bazarov says, "Nature is not a temple, but a workshop, where man's the laborer." He perfectly summarizes the utilitarian mindset of the movement right there. For the nihilists, the natural world isn't something to be worshipped or painted. It's just raw material to be measured, dissected, and utilized. In fact, there was a really popular saying of the era that Bazarov and his peers took to heart. A good pair of boots is worth more than the entire works of Pushkin. To these new radicals, aesthetics, art, poetry, philosophy, it was all utterly useless compared to practical material realities. If it didn't solve the physical problem, it was just a waste of time. Now, this profound ideological shift wasn't just some literary fiction. Turgenev was documenting a real historical rift unfolding right in front of him. Historians and academics continue to analyze this text today precisely because it serves as a flawless mirror to the actual social ruptures of 19th century Russia. Okay, let's dive into Section 3, Fathers versus Sons. To truly understand this philosophical war, we have to look at how it plays out between the characters. The tension is brilliant. We have Pavel, the uncle of Bazarov's friend, who is the ultimate man of the 1840s, an elegant, traditional aristocrat with, get this, manicured pink fingernails, who strictly defends honor and etiquette. Against him stands Bazarov, an arrogant, carelessly dressed medical student who only values the frogs he dissects. They are entirely allergic to one another. And this philosophical friction literally explodes into a duel. Pavel challenges Bazarov to a pistol duel over a perceived slight involving a servant. It is the ultimate showdown. Pavel is fighting to defend these abstract, aristocratic concepts of honor. Bazarov thinks the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous, but he participates anyway. So Bazarov ends up shooting Pavel in the leg, but his immediate reaction is so telling. He says, "I'm not a duelist, but a doctor." The very second Pavel is bleeding, Bazarov drops the romantic role of an honorable combatant, grabs his medical bag, and rushes to treat the injury. It beautifully reveals this practical, deeply human core beneath all his radical posturing. Which brings us to Section 4. The Nihilist Falls in Love. Bazarov's strict reliance on scientific reality is about to face a force it simply cannot measure under a microscope. We arrive at a really critical juncture. Can strict ideology, reason, and materialism truly account for the complexities of human emotion? Well, Bazarov is about to find out the hard way. He meets Anna Odintsova, a wealthy, fiercely independent, and highly intelligent widow. Despite all his grand theories that love is just a biological function, Bazarov falls hopelessly, passionately in love with her. When he confesses, Anna rejects him. She values her calm stability over his turbulent passion. Bazarov is devastated, and for the first time, he looks inward and recognizes the very idealism and romanticism in himself that he spent his entire life mocking in others. His ideological armor is completely shattered. Tragically, Bazarov's story ends shortly after this. While performing an autopsy, he accidentally cuts himself and contracts a fatal typhus infection. As he lays dying, he realizes his grand visions of changing society mean absolutely nothing in the face of death. Human emotion and mortality simply cannot be dissected and controlled by logic alone. The scalpel fails. Let's move to our final section, Turgenev's middle ground. With the tragic fall of the radical youth and the fading relevance of the pure aristocrat, where does the future of Russia actually lie? Turgenev ultimately proposes a synthesis through Bazarov's moderate friend Arkady and Arkady's father, Nikolai. Both men embrace necessary progressive reforms. Nikolai actually redistributes land to serfs, and both reject rigid class structures by marrying outside their station. But importantly, they don't reject beauty. They keep their love for literature, music, literature, and art. Arkady eventually comes to a really profound realization. Reforms are essential, but how to go about them? He understands that tearing absolutely everything down to the foundation is not the answer. To build a functional future, progress must be married with a deep respect for the uplifting, humanizing elements of history. Basically, you don't have to burn the library to build a laboratory. Ultimately, academic researchers point out a fascinating paradox regarding Bazarov's legacy. His failure to be a perfect nihilist is exactly what makes him such a compelling existential hero. He's caught between the cold mechanics of his science and the undeniable, messy reality of being a human who loves, suffers, and dies. He is a warning against extreme ideology for sure, but he's also a testament to the pursuit of truth. Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought. As we look at our own modern landscape today, full of rapid technological shifts, intense ideological divides, and generations that often feel like they're speaking entirely different languages, we have to wonder, are we still fighting this exact same war between fathers and sons? And if so, are we willing to find the middle ground before the scalpel fails us too? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. And as always, keep questioning the world around you.